All right, good morning. Welcome to Accuracy in America, the live but not live version. By the time you see this, we'll have done this. I will now file an official complaint with Facebook and Zoom for not being on the same page. So if anybody out there who hates the new Facebook, I think this is the reason why that we're doing this. Hopefully, maybe by next week they'll have this sorted out. We'll see. All right. Anyway, so that's my commentary. Welcome. So I'm Don Irvine. I'm joined today once again by Brian McNicoll. How you doing, Brian?
Good morning. Hello. Deplorables, dregs, despicables, and dog-faced pony soldiers.
Yes. All right. I guess there was plenty of that last night. All right. So now we're down to, was it 34 days or so before the election? I mean, it's getting hot, gotten hot and heavy. I mean, before I actually get to the debate, I do want to ask you one question now, which is now that we've been through 3 quarters of the year, this is the last day of the quarter here of September. Any feelings about how would you judge 2020 so far?
Well, I mean, it's obviously been a pretty different kind of year. I think the coronavirus, it'll be remembered as the coronavirus year. But I think, I've taken a kind of a positive view about it. I think a lot of good things. I mean, obviously, you don't want any people to die, and we don't want scourge diseases that we can't cure and so forth. But there's been a big explosion of creativity. We figured out a way to get everybody the PPE and ventilators and beds and meds they needed, right? We never lost an American over that. We figured out, don't put the sick people in the nursing homes. We figured out hydroxychloroquine and a bunch of other drugs work to ease the pain and make this go away. We learned that it's not really a threat to people below about 75 years old. And we've learned that, what the limits of our social tether are, right? With the governments have expanded their emergency powers to their apex. And we've gotten a long look at, what happens when citizens don't keep control of how much power they're given to government. So, I think a lot of good will come out of what has happened this year. There's also like the personal things. I've spent a lot more time with my family. My kids are 15 and 13. So this would have been a year that we would have been gone playing football, basketball, and baseball, and we'd have been on the road to stuff all the time. And we would not have spent nearly as much time together as we have. And generally, my wife takes one kid and I take the other kid. And so, we're split up as a family for a lot. And that's really happened very little this year. The very few things that they've gotten to do and compete in and so forth, the other kid goes and watches it and cheers them on. And that's been really heartwarming and so forth. So, it's not all negative. And, I won't remember it fondly, but I won't remember it as being, all that terrible either, because, but again, I'm lucky I have people to do this with. I'm not sitting here, I imagine if I lived alone, all those weeks of quarantine and when nobody could go anywhere and so forth, I think that could have been really difficult. And I'm sure it is difficult on some of the people out there. And, even though I went through it, had the COVID, had some days when I was kind of scared, I did end up getting that sick, and I kind of could see what it was. So, I don't know. It also has been an extraordinary year in terms of, we've made peace. Think about it. Bosnia and Kosovo, the Jews and the Arabs, these are not 10-year wars. These are 1,000-year wars that appear to be on the way to a durable peace, right? So I think there's a lot to be said for positive for what has happened this year.
Yeah, even the Afghans and the Taliban's, right? I mean, there are things out there. I mean, we're seeing, to your point, I think, countries that have really been at each other's throats, pulling back and saying, let's talk, let's figure this out, let's do something here for the greater good, and the liberals don't want to give Trump any credit for any of this, but I don't think it would have happened without
None of it
President
happens
Trump.
without it. I mean, he, I don't know, you've seen this clip of John Kerry saying there can be no deal without the Palestinians. Got to solve that Palestinian. No, 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 no. He even says that. No, 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 like 4 or 5 times. And it's like the key to this was Trump separated the interest of the Palestinians from the rest of the Arab world, right? And he's like, you know, you can keep sticking with those guys, but they're never going to say yes to anything that moves you forward. They're never going to help you. They're going to be what they are forever. And he did that. He first offered them a real generous deal that he knew they would turn down, which they did, you know, so he could go to the others and say, you know, it's the deal is not going to get any sweeter than this. And y'all all know that. And we've all been here studying this problem for 50 or 60 years. So let's take another tack. And that's what happened. It turns out that, you know, the United Arab Emirates has a lot of interests in common with Israel, right? Bahrain has a lot of interests in common with Israel that don't have anything to do with the Palestinians. Now they find themselves the isolated client state of the most isolated, diplomatically isolated country in the world, Iran. So they're even more isolated than North Korea now. So, you know, I think that he has been masterful in cleaning that up and changing it for the better.
Okay, that brings me to a question now, and I still have some other questions for you as well. But if Joe Biden wins, becomes the next president, does that change any of these peace processes at all?
It changes. I don't know about I'd have to study the Bosnia-Kosovo. He probably just leaves that in place since he doesn't really know much about it, hasn't figured out a way to make money off of it. But the Middle East peace thing would be blown up completely because he would, you know, Democrats, we list towards Iran. Republicans, we list toward the Saudis and the rest of the Arab world, the actual Arabs, right? The Iranians are not Arabs. And Iran is the troublemaker. And Trump has figured that out and isolated them. And it makes perfect sense. It's what our allies in the region want us to do. And it has and will bring great peace to the Middle East.
All right. So back to things that, as we were asking about, you know, your feelings about 2020. So one thing I have been meaning to ask you is that from your COVID experience, did your sense of taste and those other things, did they fully return?
Yes. Yeah. It took a few weeks, and there were like gaps, and, you know, taste is memory. It's almost all memory. So, you know, it was very strange. And I was really worried that like some things would not ever come back. The things that were the last to come back, like for instance, you know, I love chocolate milk. I shouldn't, I'm way too old for that, but I do. I love it. And, you know, and it's better than loving like, you know, whiskey or whatever, right? You know, it's a little better for you, whatever. So, but for the longest time, I could not taste chocolate milk, right? It was just, it hit me differently than white milk, right? But I couldn't taste it. I couldn't taste the chocolate. So it was like it was a big celebration when I fully tasted that. And sometimes even now, I kind of wonder about some of the things I eat and drink and like, what did I really taste there? So it's interesting.
Yeah, you know, you're right about the memory thing and all that stuff too. I mean, and with, you know, regular milk and chocolate milk, I mean, if you're seeing chocolate milk, you're seeing something that is dark, and so you know it needs to taste differently. You know what that's supposed to taste like.
That's right.
And it doesn't taste like, you can't taste it. It's like, that's got to drive you crazy. So I love chocolate milk as well, but I have graduated to the chocolate almond milk, you know, as a substitute for something that is lower in fat.
Okay.
You know, I mean, chocolate milk. I mean, the real chocolate milk. Boy, is that like rich.
Yeah.
And all that stuff.
That's probably why I like
it. Yeah. The other thing is going back to, you know, your feelings about 2020. Can we say, even despite all the ups and downs and, you know, the issues that we're still facing, that can I throw out the word resilient or resilience to talk about how things have gone? I mean,
yeah. I think, you know, sort of personally and on a national level, right? We had to remake the country. We had to sort of put the economy into a deep sleep and then bring it back to life, you know? And, you know, a lot of people had to hitch their wagon to that to make that happen. And, you know, Americans had to deal with, you know, now we're dealing with, you know, school at home, you know, different ways of getting our food, restaurants being closed, you know, work being changed radically. You know, a lot has been thrown at the American people, and for the most part, we've done a pretty good job with, just handling what came at us. As we were kind of all part of the Cajun Navy for this.
Yeah. All right. Now for the main event,
Dun,
the
dun,
main
dun,
analysis,
dun.
which is last night's debate. And, there's anytime there's a presidential debate, there's lots of news. And anything that's involving President Trump, there's also going to be lots of news. Eagerly anticipated by both sides to see how this was going to turn out. I mean, I'm going to turn over. What is your feeling about this? Do we have a winner, loser? How do you analyze this debate last night?
Well, what I'm seeing on Twitter, which is left leaning, just the whole panoply of people who come onto my timeline. Many more of them are left than right. Is a lot of talk about they were both terrible, and it was terrible that they argued the way they did, and it was nothing but an unproductive spat, right? And the nevers, that's what they're saying. The Trump fans are saying, there's no other way to get these arguments out, right? He says, Biden's up there saying, Trump called the troops suckers and losers. No, he didn't. Okay. But how do we, when does he get to point that out? What's his venue to where people will actually listen to what he says, where he can say that? Last night was his chance, and he didn't miss his chance. And it may have looked cacophonous and unpleasant at times, really, but it was necessary because he doesn't get to be unfiltered. Everything he says goes through a filter that very much favors Biden. And so, he landed some major haymakers on Biden, and you can walk away from it, but the people who voted, right? So C-SPAN, the C-SPAN people who watched the debate vote was 63-30 Trump. Telemundo was 66-30 Trump. Who was it? Fox News's was 60-31 Trump. Okay, so I mean, I'm sure if you're sitting home watching this and you're for Biden, you're right now, well, this one's biased this way, that one's biased that way, and it may be true, but when you have numbers like that, something real happened there, right? And I think it's the first people knew about a lot of the stuff that you and I keep up with every day, like that, Hunter Biden got $3.5 million from the wife of the mayor of Moscow, that he, took money from China, that he worked for Burisma, and Joe's just like, that didn't happen. It's not true. And it's it is true. I thought Trump got in a good thing about, Biden said something about the crowds. He said, well, you can't draw those crowds. If you could draw those crowds, you would. I thought that kind of handled that. I thought that he did a good job. Trump did a good job getting his explanation out about COVID, right? He missed some points. He's, if I had been writing his script there or talking into his ear, as apparently may have been the case with Biden, it does look like there was some kind of chicanery going on where they can talk to him during the debate, communicate to him, but he was left to, calling Trump names and telling him to shut up and calling him a clown. And, I mean, it was just Biden on the ropes, defending against the stuff Trump said, even though, every time he got in trouble, the moderator came along and helped him and said, oh, we can't ask about that. Why can't we ask about that? But some of the lines of inquiry that Chris Wallace closed off would have been incredibly productive for Trump. You could see, you could see Biden, for instance, when the subject of his son came up. First of all, he does a despicable thing, and he goes off on Trump about Beau Biden and all the awards he won. And it's like, you keep talking about my son, and Biden knows full well that Beau is not the son he's talking about, right? Beau is not the one with the baby mama drama in Arkansas, and taking money from foreign governments and going with him on foreign trips and got kicked out of the Navy for cocaine. That's all Hunter. That's not Beau. And so Trump put him straight on that. So, I thought that he landed some excellent haymakers. I didn't think Biden really cut into him at all. If they did, if you know about something, tell me. I may have missed it. But I didn't think that there was anything he said. I thought that Trump parried the death toll thing, because that was going to be a big factor, right? He was going to say 200,000 died, 200,000 died. And Trump well, it would have been 2 million under you, and explained why. And you can buy his explanation or not. But now if the idea is in the head of people, it's like, okay, what if Biden had been in charge? And, what would have been his response? And how would it have fared, right? You now have to go ask all those questions.
Yeah, I mean, I think, with regard to the COVID thing, it was, that's definitely a potential for Trump to have a weakness. But I did appreciate the fact that he went ahead and mentioned numbers rather than letting Biden try to get the upper hand on that part of it. He kind of turned that around on him, and I think that helped kind of mitigate the issue there. One thing that Trump is getting a lot of criticism for, though, is the statement on the Proud Boys, that he maybe he should have unequivocally just denounced white supremacists and things like that.
Well, let's look at what the exchange is there. And he asked Trump, do you want to do it? I'm seeing I have the transcript up here, and I do not anymore. He asked, would you denounce him? And he says, who do you want me to denounce? Yeah, sure, I'll do it. I want to have peace. Who am I supposed to denounce? And in the process of, Wallace trying to make this some ritualistic thing. I mean, the question is, do you denounce? The answer was yes, I denounce, right? But then it was like, specifically say these specific words that I have set out for you, right? That's where the trouble started on that. So,
I mean, the Proud Boys apparently were very happy with that statement that Trump did make. Apparently,
yeah, they weren't helpful with the T-shirt.
Yeah, found our leader. I'm like, yeah, that's not really helpful at this point in time, and things like that. But what about things like Biden and the Green New Deal? Biden has got a climate change plan. Looks like AOC tried to soften the blow a little bit, with.
Hey, I found this. Can we go back?
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
I want people to understand what he said.
Yeah.
Okay. The question, Wallace said, you repeatedly criticized the vice president. Now it's gone away. Okay. The vice president for not specifically calling out Antifa and other left-wing extremist groups, but are you willing tonight to condemn white supremacists and militia groups and to say that they need to stand down and not add to the violence in a number of these cities, as we saw in Kenosha and as we've seen in Portland? Okay. White supremacists are about 1 or 2% of the problem. And I think most people realize that, right? There are about 7,000, according to the FBI, there's about 7,000 white supremacists in the whole country. Okay, so that they're not the problem. They're not in Portland, Seattle, Minneapolis, New York, Chicago, St. Louis making problems, because there's only 7,000 of them, right? If they're in all those places, there's not many of them there because you're running out of members, right? Okay, so Trump's answer, sure, I'm willing to do that. Are you prepared specifically to do it? I would say almost everything I see is from the left wing, not from the right wing. But what are you saying? I'm willing to do anything. I want to see peace. Well, do it, sir. Say it. Do it. Say it, Biden says. Okay, what do you want to call them? Give me a name. Give me a name. Go ahead. Who do you want me to condemn? White supremacists and white right-wing militia. At this point, Trump says, Proud Boys, stand back and stand by. But I'll tell you what, somebody's got to do something about Antifa and the left, because this is not a right-wing problem. This is a left-wing problem, which is the truth. Right now, would I have done that differently? Yeah, I would not have said anything about the Proud Boys at all. I would have just said, white supremacists, get out of the way. But, he went for style points, and then it probably was not the best thing he ever did, because you can tell, he's pretty much willing to say whatever it is Chris wants him to say to condemn. And there's also, somebody has moved something this morning that says, there are 22 instances where Trump has condemned white nationalists. So I think the record on that is pretty clear, including Charlottesville, which uh, Wallace did not challenge Biden on lying again about what Trump said about Charlottesville, the very fine people hoax. He again let him get away with that. So when you say, "Oh, Trump shouldn't be all rude," I mean, these are the kind of things that he has to get rude about, because the moderator's not going to do it. Mainstream media is not going to do it. It's not going to happen unless he does it in that format, because that's the only place that Biden lovers will watch him and are forced to listen to what he actually says, as opposed to their caricatures of what he is, it does, and says.
Yeah, I mean, you make an interesting point there too about the generally small number of white supremacists that the FBI has identified. Because as I thought about it, what you were saying, it's just that, you know, all they really need is for like 5 or 10 of these white supremacist guys to show up. And it's as if it helps the media change the narrative from the left-wing Antifas and all those people to white supremacists are now responsible for whatever goes on here.
Are battling protesters.
Yeah.
White supremacists are battling protesters.
Yeah, so I think that's a good point, but one that's obviously lost on the media because it doesn't fit their narrative as usual. What about, okay, so I was going to say, while we're doing this, what about the Green New Deal issue that came up last night? I mean, was Biden correct to say he doesn't support the Green New Deal, but he's still got a pretty expensive climate change plan? AOC tried to kind of paper that over a little bit. I mean, what's your take on this?
Well, I mean, it says in his platform that the Green New Deal provides the framework for what he wants to do. So, it's in your platform, and your surrogates are saying it, and you're saying you're against fracking and want to end all fossil fuel use in the U.S. by 2035, which is 15 years away. It was not, it used to seem like I was a kid. 2035, that's like another galaxy, but it's not anymore, right? And the notion that we are going to be done with internal combustion engines in 15 years is nuts, right? Trump he gave kind of a muddled answer to that, but you could tell that like he knew something about it, where he was talking about different cars coming online that use less fuel and that are lighter and safer and so forth, or not lighter, and so therefore safer, as opposed to going for the CAFE standards, the mileage standards.
Yeah, with this, this big push. I mean, we're seeing it obviously with Gavin Newsom in California about EVs, by 2035, and I think the trucks have to do so by 2040 or 2045 or something like that. It's just that exactly how are the people that are on the lower end of the socioeconomic scale supposed to be able to afford an EV? EVs are expensive. The batteries are expensive.
Right.
And it's just like, it's one thing for people who are running out there and buying Teslas and some of the other cars, but they're still, in order to sell a lot of these cars for a lot of people, the government, they've had to push for huge, tax incentives to make it even reasonably affordable. And even then, to me, I look at it and says, it's still too expensive for someone like me. And how many, after,
he said last night, he's going to do 6,500 electronics charging stations around the country, so we can do this on the highway or whatever. But I mean, so there's going to be government run electronic charging, and guess what? How does all this electricity get created? You don't have enough electricity in California to keep the lights on now, right? And this guy's talking about making everybody drive an electronic car. So what will we do on the days when your part of California is scheduled for one of his brownouts, right? Do we just not drive that day? No one goes anywhere? I mean, this is nuts. These people, they don't realize it's like, I understand your goals, but just saying, hey, we're just going to declare this to be true is not governing. It's not leading. It's pie in the sky, and it hurts a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking even right now that, you and I both know that we can pull our cars up to a gas station, and in 15 minutes or less, depending on how much gas we need, we're done and we hit the road again. And if you're on a road trip, you can go anywhere from 250 if you've got kind of more of a gas guzzler to maybe 400 miles in a gas engine. But if you're dealing with an EV, you pull up to a charging station, you're going to have to be sitting around for quite a while for it to recharge. And then you've got maybe 200 miles, and then you've got to do it again.
Yeah.
This to me, it's just impractical.
Right.
Look, if people want to buy EVs, that's fine. They can go and do it. And I'm seeing more charging stations. My local Giant, I'm like, whoa, where did these come from? This happened only within the last, few weeks. That's fine. And all that, but it's not something I'm planning on rushing out and doing. And COVID has changed my habits enough that my driving is still way down.
Yeah.
That spending extra money on an EV doesn't really make economic sense to me.
Right. Yeah. The whole way we're traveling is changing,
Right. All right. So, but what about Chris Wallace's performance last night then? I mean, once again, there's a lot of things. I mean, a lot of people were critical of him. Other people said, what's a guy like that supposed to do in a situation like that? I mean, what was your observation?
Well, he I saw one count that said he interrupted Trump 35 times, Biden none. And Biden was interrupting Trump too, right? I saw another that said it was like 76-11, and I don't know what they're considering interrupt and all that, but I mean the figures give you the idea of what happened. So he was very aggressive about policing up the 2 minutes and the uninterrupted this and that on behalf of Biden. But when Trump got to pressing him on things that were uncomfortable, such as his son's dealings, I mean that goes to the corruption of this guy. And I keep telling people, it's like, if you're a Democrat, you want whatever Biden has done to come out now. Because if he gets elected, and then, it's going to be like Trump's first 3 years. He's going to spend it all under investigation. And unlike Trump's first 3 years, we got the receipts. They'll be in trouble this time because it's not all made up, put together stuff to help Hillary Clinton's campaign. We've got proof that these things happen. And, they're letting a guy slide through because they hate Trump so bad. But that guy is going to get them in trouble because he had a lot of loose ends, and he made it so his family could make the money.
So do you think after that maybe Joe Biden might say, "Hey, yeah, Chris, I'll come on your show"? That was that debate.
I don't give him an F. My timeline is full of people just destroying Chris Wallace, just furious with Chris Wallace. But he asked Biden some tough questions. And he tried to corner him a couple of times when Biden did not give satisfactory answers. So it's not a zero. He did some stuff that, that had not been done before in terms of trying to probe and make this guy actually say something. And he confronted him with, he said, Kamala had not said something. And he's like, no, here's what she said. And, quoted it back to him and so forth. So, Biden did not seem command of his facts at all. And we know zero more about what he would do as president than we did, before that debate, right? He said he would have a plan, a 5-year plan or whatever. But that's all he ever said. Plan. What's in the plan? What's the plan do? Just got to have plan, right?
Yeah. So what about also the calls from the media? A lot of people in the media, as well as Democrats, saying no more debates. Get rid of the debates. Is that? I mean, the debates are going to go forward, I think.
Well, here's the thing. First of all, he cannot miss the debates, or he will lose. That's the last day of his campaign. He will be destroyed. People will see that he can't handle it, can't stand up to it, and they'll have to make their choices accordingly. Second of all, why are the people who are insisting Biden mop the floor with Trump last night not wanting any more debates? If he mopped the floor with Trump, why wouldn't you want 2 or 3 or add one in? Let's have more debates, right? It's because your guy got smoked, right? He was forced to disavow the Green New Deal, Medicare for all, Bernie Sanders by name. All the Bernie bros watched that and went, what are we doing? What am I going to do November 3rd? It may not be vote, right? I may golf that day because, Joe's not thinking about me.
Yeah, I mean, Joe Biden, we now know for sure that he is the Democrat Party, right? The Democrat Party.
That's what he said.
Yeah.
So, as he's telling them, all those promises that we made, to to hold what you valued out to be important, you know, they're all, you know, they're all renegotiable, right? Because, you know, I'm trying to win an election here. So, you know, I mean, maybe they understand that, and that, you know, the danger of Trump serving 4 more years overrides their concerns. But, you know, he basically didn't, you know, decommitted from a lot of stuff in his platform. And Trump made a point of, you know, he'll get excoriated for being nasty and all that, but, you know, he caused a lot of problems for Biden within the Democrat Party.
Based on last night, though, and whether or not, you know, whether or not Wallace was really kind of helping Biden out, or he was just having a hard time, you know, controlling Trump and struggling with other issues in there. How do the next two debate, the moderators, deal with this? The guy from C-SPAN, and I think it's Kristen Welker from NBC. Are they going to be able to do any better, you know, going forward?
Scully, right? Is the other one.
Yeah.
Well, okay. You know, we talked about this some last week. The role of the moderator, let's reduce the role of the moderator. Let's don't have more moderator. Let's no more cutting off of the candidates while they're talking, more interruptions, more redirections. Let's have less. Let's say if it's a brawl, it's a brawl, right? Let's let both guys think on their feet. Both guys explain what they want to do for America. Both guys, you know, take on the challenges presented by the other candidate, right? Answer their tough questions, right? And see how they fare in that. You know, quit refereeing it. Doesn't need a referee. You know, they start to punch each other, get up, pull them apart. I agree, right? But if they're not throwing hands, let them talk, right? What happened, the problem last night was, you know, when you arrogate to yourself the power to decide when people talk and stop talking, then, you know, your thumb is going to come down on the scale. And Wallace couldn't help himself. He stopped Trump at several key moments when Trump was getting ready to unload key points that Biden couldn't answer.
All right. I think we've spent more than enough time on the debate analysis. I do want to get to at least one more topic, which is Supreme Court. Definitely a big hot topic going on there. You know, it may have been shoved to the side temporarily, at least by the debate and all the fallout from the debate or whatever. But we have Amy Coney Barrett, as kind of predicted by many, has been nominated. The liberals are just they're losing it, you know, over this. Part of the problem for them is that, you know, the Republicans look like they're going to, for the most part, stick together and confirm her. And Lindsey Graham has announced that he's going to start the hearings on the 12th of October. And I think he hopes to be totally wrapped up. And I guess so it's ready to go to the full Senate by the 22nd of October. You know, so that's well before the election. I mean, what's your take? I mean, you know, she's been criticized, and we've talked about this a little bit before, you know, for her Catholic faith, but I think the attacks have just been, you know, those are unconscionable to me.
I told my kids to, you know, get ready to be on the receiving end of some prejudice, like you may never see again in your lifetime, right? Because of, you know, the attacks on Catholic faith, right? And you know, the dogma lives loudly within you and all that kind of stuff. First of all, you know, the problem for this with Trump, and I said this the moment it happened, is, you know, this was, you know, one more black swan for him to deal with, one more event out of nowhere that he just has to react to. And, you know, it's not the same as Merrick Garland, right? The Senate and the House, the Senate and White House were controlled by different parties at that time. And, you know, you're saying a lame duck president should get to make the pick, you know, with the Senate in the hands, you know, of the other party. You know, he puts his pick up, which he did. He made a pick, right? And you're saying that they should vote on that? What would they have done? They would have voted it down, and they should have voted it down, right? In where the country was at that point. Now it's different. The country has decided it wants Republicans in charge of the Senate and a Republican in the White House. And a vacancy comes up, you know, it's their constitutional duty to fill it. Okay. Now, you know, the timing of this, you know, it's unfortunate, but it is what it is. But, you know, as we have many times talked about, if you are explaining, you're losing, right? And he's explaining that this is not Merrick Garland. This is not going back on what we did there. This is something completely different. But it's being treated as an explanation, not as, or an excuse, not an explanation. And it's hurting him in the polls. It hurt him about 4 or 5 points in the polls. I don't think it'll cost him the election. I think he still wins, but it is a problem. The headwind that overcomes it is the economy, of course. It looks like we're going to have a huge Friday jobs report coming out this Friday, and it looks like the quarterly economic growth that comes out at the end of October, just days before the election, will set a record. Should be 35 to 40%. So, that's going to be hard. Trump makes the argument on the economy. Numbers are going to start to line up that makes a case that probably cannot be overcome.
And I think that, the Democrats are in somewhat of a difficult position anyway with the hearings, because after the whole Kavanaugh disaster for them, if they go full bore, after Barrett, they just expose themselves, another attack on her, one thing that really bothered me was just these liberals who went after her for her adopting those 2 children from Haiti.
Right.
To me, it was, real hypocrisy on their point. They revere the Tom Cruises, the Angelina Jolies, Madonna, all these people who have adopted, Black kids, and they think this is great. But, she does it, and they call into question, did she do it above board? Was there some little nefarious thing going on there? She's a white colonizer. Unbelievable.
Yeah, it was unbelievable. Some of the arguments were really tells you a lot more about the person making the arguments than it does about her. I don't know that you'll see a big circus. I think you'll see some, they'll do their due diligence, and they will do they'll put forth some effort to it. But I don't think you're going to see the full blown circus, because I think that they know that hurt them, and that they are at the very least unsure about what would happen, how people would feel about an attack on this woman. She's standing there with those 7 kids. They're likely to be at the hearings, sitting there behind her at the deal. She has a lot of people from the other side of the aisle who have known her in various professional capacities, saying she's outstanding and thoughtful and a terrific person and so forth. And it's just going to be hard for them to dig their heels into any point. And then, the option of finding some person out of her deep, dark past to say, bad things about her that, can't be proven or disproven, they kind of played that card. And I think I would be surprised to see it get played again.
Yeah, the other thing too is that the liberals, the Democrats, the argument now too is just that, this means that Obamacare is doomed and Roe v. Wade will get overturned. But there's not a Roe v. Wade type of case before the court right now, as far as I know.
Right.
And even on the Obamacare thing, my longstanding belief is just that, yes, I could see potentially, taking apart certain pieces of Obamacare, but we've seen for the last several years that there's a reluctance to actually, declare it null and void. And once you have these entitlements in place, trying, to take away the pre-existing conditions or the coverage for your kid, up until the age of 26, I see that as virtually impossible to strip away. And those are some of the Democrats' big talking points. And I just don't see this happening. Particularly.
Well, he's already said he's going to preserve pre-existing conditions. I think 26 is a little old for being on your parents' health plan myself. That was kind of a giveaway to get votes. There's no individual mandate. There's no employer mandate. What exactly would they be declaring unconstitutional? Right? I guess those mandates, which are already de facto over anyway. So, it's much ado about nothing. But again, you're explaining, right? That, he wants to eliminate Obamacare. And, you say, so what? Right? But you then have to explain why it's not important, right? It doesn't really matter what they do about Obamacare. She would see a case on that. She would not, as you say, there's not a Roe challenge in the pipeline. And my Catholic friends, my pro-life friends, I say to you, do not expect it to be overturned the day she takes over
Right.
or gets in there, right? Or anytime soon, because she also has said that she respects stare decisis, honoring precedent, so forth. So, if a case comes up that challenges the legal arguments behind Roe v. Wade, you will have some people who are more receptive to it than Ruth Bader Ginsburg would have been. But, unless it's a persuasive, overwhelming argument, it won't overcome a Roe. It won't. That's not the way courts work.
Yeah, it'll take some time before we see anything happen on that front, in my opinion. All right. Another big news story this past week has been President Trump's taxes. So there was a big New York Times story, a very lengthy New York Times story, based on alleged Trump's tax documents that they have gotten here. Now, one of the things that I want to find out is that they say they obtained these legally. Now, I will say
no, that's not what they said. What they said is they obtained them from people who had legal access to them. It's not illegal for the Times to print them, but it is illegal for someone to give them to the Times, right? And nothing about what they said changed that.
Yeah. So in the end, though, I mean, what is this saying about that? I mean, obviously the Democrats are making a big deal of it. Liberals are making a big deal of what appears to be very little in taxes paid. But I actually have a friend of mine from church who's on Facebook, and he works at the Pentagon, and he also invests in apartments. He actually does seminars on investing in apartment buildings, and he's part of a partnership or whatever. But he declared on Facebook that he didn't vote for Trump in 2016. He's undecided about 2020, but he has not paid federal income taxes since 2001. He knows all about depreciation and what that does. And so here, to me, that's definitely a much more credible source from a guy who hasn't paid taxes, federal income taxes, for about 20 years, because he has all these write-offs that he has based on the tax code, completely legal and above board.
So just quick explanation of what goes on there. So what Trump does is, he makes a lot of money off his branding and the other stuff he sells and his hotels and whatnot. Okay. He owns a lot of buildings. Right. So what he does is the buildings depreciate. They get a little less valuable every year. Right. So the tax on those buildings goes down. Right. The tax load goes down. Right. Liability goes down. So he applies that to the other payments. Right. So he says, I owe $1,000, but like these buildings have appreciated or depreciated so much that their value is down. So now I only owe $800, right? So, and since he doesn't sell the buildings, he doesn't realize the capital gain, that makes this come out in the wash, right? I mean, we let people depreciate because we know they're going to sell it and we're going to get it out of that capital gain, right? So he just holds on to the property and keeps taking the depreciation deduction. So the way they got to the $750 is he had tax bills in those 2 years of $4.2 million and $1 million. In previous years, he had paid more tax than was necessary. So he said, just keep it and apply it to future years, right? So they applied to the first one was the 4.2 million. And so they applied 4.2 million then, and they said, hey, you still owe 750. So he wrote him a check for 750. That's how he came to pay 750 tax in those years. And this is all explained in the story. So the people, they have no excuse for not knowing it, because, the same story that they got their little headline that he paid 750 in a year explained that no, he actually paid 1 million and 4.2 million in a year. Right?
Yeah.
And he was playing it straight. There's also, it shows there's no connection to Russia. It shows where he gets his loans from. And it shows that, all these guys, they say, oh, he's got all this debt coming due. Okay. He owns 550 businesses. They're in various financial states, right? Some of them need capital, some of them don't. at any moment in Donald Trump's business life, debts are going to be coming due, right? It's impossible for it to be otherwise because they keep moving. They don't stop, right? So, the notion, oh, he's got debts coming due. What's he going to do? It's like, he's going to pay them. And if he can't pay them, he's going to sell a building and use that money and pay them and then pay the capital gains or whatever. But, his people figure that out. And they've been figuring it out for him legally because he gets audited every year, just like he said, for, decades now. So he's not doing anything illegal. And every American has the duty to minimize your tax liability to the maximum extent you can.
Yeah, he has that $72.9 million tax refund that he's in a dispute with the IRS about. So that's something that also factors in there. But from the standpoint of the Times, I mean, getting this material from people who had legal access to it, the people who had legal access to it break the law, as far as you think?
They're not supposed to turn over people's tax forms to a newspaper. That's clearly, those are felonies, and if they can figure out who did it, they can punish them. They've said they were going to. I mean, I bet that that indictment comes about 3 weeks after Durham finally indicts somebody. If then.
Okay. All right. 2 minutes.
2 minutes. So we are to there was something on ballots. You're seeing, another thing that came up a little bit in the debate last night was ballot integrity and the fact that there's all these ballots being mailed out all over the country. I don't think, I think Trump kind of surprised Biden about that, where he's talking about ballots and ditches and trash cans and all this stuff. These are all stories that we're seeing, and they show you the photo of the ballots laying in the ditch, right? It's not made up. Okay. And, Biden had no answer for it because I don't think he knew about it. I don't think it's not covered in left-wing media because it makes them look bad. So he's left unprepared, I mean, there's a lot of things that, like, I get into these discussions with people on Facebook and they don't know basic facts about these things. So, there's still people who don't know that, Biden's son has this stripper, and this granddaughter he's never acknowledged and all this stuff. They don't ever talk about that because they don't honestly do not know it. So, and then you say, oh, you're just making that up. It's not made up. Okay. So we have, in Fairfax County, so in Virginia, there's 3 counties that are sending out ballots that are improperly printed, to help the Democrats along. Okay. And they can say it's not to help the Democrats along, but the 3 jurisdictions are Fairfax, which is leftist, Richmond, which is leftist, and Rico, which is trending left, right? So that's, there's no accident where they're sending them. There's no accident where the accidents are occurring. So there's also Brooklyn. They send a bunch of ballots, and it's all about misprinted, this and that and the other. But, I mean, it's Brooklyn. So, you make judgment for yourself there.
All right. My final thing is just to kind of play on that, too, was just that Tulsi Gabbard she actually cited a Project Veritas video that maybe that Ilhan Omar, there was some ballot harvesting, and she's come out against that. I mean, she's leaving Congress, but this is another. I was surprised to see her do this, but she has definitely marched to the beat of a different drummer on many occasions on things like this. But reminding people about ballot harvesting, because that's going to be a problem in this election, I think.
Yeah, it is, and it appears that O'Keefe did his work here, and that it's going to be hard for prosecutors to ignore this. They also already state officials in Minnesota are saying they do have to take a look at it.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. Please, as always, stay safe, stay well. Remember, we live in the greatest country in the world. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise. God bless America, and we will see you again next week. Hopefully live. We'll have to see how all these things go. All right. Thanks a lot, everyone. We'll see you.